Welcome into Basketball by Association. This is nothing but basketball pertaining to the association of hoopage, that is. That's the NBA, for those who don't know. And the G League. We do some Turkish basketball every now and then. If it pertains to us, whatever league Victor Wembanyama's in, we dominate that coverage as well. My name is Arky. Shea, that's Joel C. Cordes. Joel, can I ask you a question right at the very top?
Yeah, let's do it.
Did you have any idea the Luka Kyrie thing would not work out?
We had some inclinations. Yeah, we had some inclinations. And there's all sorts of counter narratives going on to show that it's not really his fault. And there are other things going on. And yes, the Dallas Mavericks were a flawed team before Kyrie got there. That's why they would take a big swing on a trade like that for Kyrie. They gave up some useful parts, including some good defensive parts that have not been replaced on a team that cannot stop anybody at this point. But yes, it is weird that Kyrie shows up and suddenly the chemistry goes out the window. And this is rough stuff right now because we've talked about the front office might be in some trouble here. The coaching staff might be in some trouble, especially if they miss the play-in altogether, which they are in danger of right now. There's big changes afoot to the entire roster and organization if they flop like this. But there's big ramifications for Kyrie, too. We could be seeing him on, I don't want to say probably his last, but it might be his second to last look at the NBA level, despite the fact that, yeah, his scoring numbers look good, blah, blah, blah. But the amount of money that he's going to ask for hitting free agency is not going to be the amount that I don't think really anybody's going to want to give. So he may take a make-right one-year deal somewhere else, or he may just be so offended that nobody wanted to give him the money that we see him sit until the market comes around, and it may never come around to him. He may have to come around to it. It's just the way it goes. We do got to name the episode real quick. This is episode 139. 2 players in NBA history have logged 139 career playoff games. One of them is Kurt Rambis. We are not going to name an episode after him, not because I have a thing against the Lakers, which I do, but because I have a thing against Kurt Rambis as head coach of the Minnesota Timberwolves and then being in the front office during truly the darkest days of the franchise, the David Kahn era. So I don't want to revisit any of that. Instead, Arky, Shea, we're going to give you an olive branch here. I feel like we did this last week when we let you name the episode, but this one you're really going to like. He's a Hall of Famer, 11-time All-Star, 7-time All-NBA player, 85-86 Rookie of the Year, and that would mean he's on the All-Rookie team, 3-time All-Defensive Player. He's on the 75th anniversary team, and methinks you probably have a soft spot in your heart for this gentleman who logged 17 NBA seasons.
Oh, well, Joel, can I ask you this question first?
I mean, you already asked me one question, but I guess, yeah.
Well, about this, I appreciate us going back-to-back weeks heavy on the Knicks. That would be the recently fired Patrick Ewing from his gig at Georgetown, which he was terrible. And Georgetown was in a terrible spot to try to have to fire someone who's been so important to that university, bringing them their national championship in '85. So, that's too bad. But more importantly, it's Patrick Ewing. I mean, there's no doubt about it. It's the big, handsomest, most handsome fellow that's ever played for New York. No, I don't want Patrick Ewing to hear this, so no one send it to him. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate how old man that looked from day one in the NBA. Not just his face and his head and his body, but like the wraps around his knees. Like it felt like he was rec league from day one in the NBA.
It was Greg Oden-esque before Greg Oden was probably even a person yet.
I would watch him all the time and be like, he's probably almost done, right? And this would be in like 93, 94, just like, this dude's 100, it feels like. But, people forget about Patrick Ewing and how really dominant he was and how really, really good it was. They sort of, when he took he's one of the top 75 players in all-time NBA history, what they all rate that. But people sort of forget how big he was for New York and for that franchise for such a long time. Like, it just, there's so much talk about, is this guy the greatest to ever do this constantly? Then we always want to look at 1 or 2, maybe 3, but we sort of forget, dominant young Shaq, and we forget dominant young Patrick Ewing. Like, we forget. We just way too easily forget some of the really great. And by the way, Patrick was great for a long, long time. So let's not act like it was just like a 3-year in and out. But
yeah, and I mean he had his foibles, and I feel like Ewing is on the same level probably of David Robinson, which is slightly below Hakeem, who won championships.
Sure.
It's below Shaq, who won some championships. But in that era, you still, if you're building a team, you're going to take Ewing and David Robinson above an Alonzo Mourning, above a Dikembe Mutombo, fellow Georgetown guys, some of the other elite centers who roamed the earth at that time. They were elite. They were perennial all-stars. You built your offense around them. You anchored your defense around them. The scouting report was going to be anchored completely around trying to beat them. And night in and night out, they brought it. They ran into some elite teams, for the Knicks, obviously, it was the Bulls. It was the Pistons a little bit before that. And they had their shots, but you can lay some of that at the feet of Patrick Ewing. You can lay some of that at the feet of the supporting cast, what have you, but you cannot question, like a Charles Barkley, like a Reggie Miller, John Stockton, Karl Malone, the guys that didn't get the rings. You cannot argue the sheer level of talent or the determination, the stick-to-itiveness that those guys just kept coming back year after year after year. They were elite, and they were in the mix, and they are part of what made the NBA golden era that, so many of us grew up in watching and where we got hooked on the league.
And there's another thing you sort of alluded to, and we'll move on. It's just they played so many games every single year. That's just what you did, right? Like, there wasn't a load management. There wasn't, unless you were like hurt. Like, you played and you stuck through it. Especially you go back to those, early mid-90s Eastern Conference years, man, especially like late 80s, mid to late 80s, when he's coming into the league, going into the mid-90s, basically. The entire Patrick Ewing saga was, hey, you're going to get beat every single night by one set of dudes or another. So
and Ewing, 10 straight All-Star appearances. I know we want to move on. 10 straight and 11 out of 12. The only time he missed in that stretch was 86-87, his sophomore season, where he did only play 63 games, and I'm assuming that's because of injury. I haven't looked that one up. But very, very close to being 12 straight years of All-Star appearances for that man.
Yeah, those are hard to do. Let me get back to the Kyrie thing situation. When Kyrie was traded for, Luka was like, hey, I need some help kind of thing. So, Mark Cuban said, let's take a flyer on Kyrie Irving. Luka was okay with Kyrie Irving coming in, and immediately downhill. When they made the trade, Joel, do you remember they were 4th in the West? They were 4th in the West when Kyrie joined that team. Now, as you sort of alluded to before, they're on the cusp of missing the play-in. And the play-in is designed to give you some help to make it to the playoffs. So that is a horrific fall. I think there's something like 5. What's it?
Most teams have about 5 games left. Yeah, I'll look on Dallas' schedule here.
Dallas
has 5 left.
Their record together is like something like 5-13 or something like really abysmal since they've been. It's just been a free fall for that franchise. The only good news for Dallas is that they can easily get rid of him this year, and they have a max spot once they do it. So they're able to negotiate for a max spot for 2023 and 4.
And I think they will move on unless internally there's some belief that, hey, he's doing the right things. Luka's doing the right things. It's the rest of the pieces that don't fit. And we gave up a lot to get rid of Kyrie. We're not going to recoup that cost. We're not, I don't think Kyrie's max money. He's probably going to ask for it. He's going to believe that he deserves it. I don't think there's any team in their right mind that is or should or will give him that. When you say they were 4th in the West, that is true. But we also have to throw the caveat on there that this Western Conference has been so tight after the top 3 that you could be sitting 4th in the West and be like 2.5 games above the 10th place team. 3.5 games, what
Oh,
have
sure.
you.
Well,
So
they clearly made that trade because they thought that would at least solidify them for a home playoff spot or propel them into the top 2 or 3 or something by the time
I'm not sugarcoating that this has sucked and that some heads are going to roll if they miss this. But it is different than if it had been, hey, we were 4th, we were 10 games above 500, and it absolutely fell out. There's some other teams that have gotten hot right as Dallas has gotten cold that has played a part into this, but I think Dallas would go down as the most disappointing team of the entire year if they miss the playoffs and the play-in, I should say. But even if they get into the play-in, which I think they probably will, I think they're probably still capable of doing that over these last 5. They don't inspire much confidence that they're going to win much in the play-in. So even just getting into the play-in and not getting out of that, massive disappointment. I can't think of another team outside of maybe the Lakers that would be that disappointing. You could throw the Nets in there but we kind of knew it was going to come apart at some point during this year, that they were just biding their time to find the right deals in Brooklyn.
Yeah, this podcast is going to be a little bit shorter. Just some timing issues have sort of crept up on us. But I do want to mention a couple big things. I want you to give a chance to give a quick shout out to a team that finally ended the drought officially last night. The Sacramento Kings are into the playoffs for the first time in 16 seasons. That is now no longer the longest reigning franchise without a playoff spot. How cool is that?
It's very cool. And in the past, when Sacramento got in, most of the teams that they heralded into the playoffs were not only worth watching, but they made the playoffs and they made the league a better place. And I feel the same way about these Kings. I'm just happy to finally be able, and I've said this multiple times, to be able to tune into Sacramento Kings games of my own volition, not because they're playing somebody I wanted to see or because I feel like, man, I better check up on them and just see it's been a while. But I actually want to watch those games. I enjoy watching those games. The league is better for it. They play an entertaining brand of basketball. We'll see what they can do in the playoffs, but they've given themselves a huge chance here, and they've taken advantage of a year where a lot of other teams were struggling a little bit. But the foundation is good. They've got a nice mix of veterans, good youngsters too. Again, like you and I talked about last week, I don't know. A lot of it is matchup based, but I think they may wind up being the underdog in a lot of series that they may see even as the 3rd seed. But you'll take it. You'll take the success that they've had and just roll the ball out there and see how you do this first time and learn from it and build off it and just make sure that you don't have that sophomore slump. You don't want to be the Atlanta Hawks from a few years ago. Like, you got to actually learn from it and not say, oh, we're coming up, we're on the come up, look at us. Like, no, the work has just begun. But I think there's enough guys there that know that.
Also want to mention, speaking sort of the playoff race, because there's not been a whole lot of movement and overarching themes that have happened since we last spoke. But the Phoenix Suns do get Kevin Durant back last night, which is just in the nick of time. One, he struggled a little bit, but he's just, he doesn't matter what he does right now.
He was rusty. Yeah,
exactly. But it's wild to me that the difference between 3 and 4, which is Sacramento and Phoenix, is 5 games this late into the season. Like that, it's clearly been sort of a big drop. But Phoenix glad to be able to get Kevin Durant back and sort of get ready just in time for that playoff push, because they weren't going to do it without him. And this, we'll see over the next week and a half, 2 weeks, how they start to gel and into the first round of the playoffs. But, now's the time to get him back. Let's just put it
and you have the feeling that had he not rolled his ankle in warm-ups like 3
right.
weeks ago, 2.5 weeks ago, whatever it was, they probably would have been able to overtake Sacramento, who's played good basketball, but the Suns really look difficult to guard. And last night, Minnesota was down Taurean Prince. Kyle Anderson was sick. Anthony Edwards was sick. They were not right. They made a lot of mistakes. Minnesota's been hot over the last 6-7 games, beating playoff opponents, looking like the team they were supposed to be. But they come into Phoenix, and the Suns were the ones that executed. And the Suns showed me a couple of things last night that really bode well for them, because it was major questions when they added Durant. And we didn't have a chance to answer those because we've hardly seen Durant. Questions were, is this team too top heavy with its scores? Yes, we know Durant will score a bunch. Booker will too. Paul can still chip in some. Ayton is still a good scorer. But what about the other guys? I look up and down the roster, and the fact that They've found roles now for Josh Okogie and Torrey Craig, which are perfect, and we'll get to those two guys in a minute. But TJ Warren is back, can put the ball in the bucket when he's healthy. Cam Payne is back. Terrence Ross is back. Darius Baisley can score a little bit, but he's not been in the rotation. Damian Lee and Landry Shamet were both in the rotation throughout much of the year and scored a lot of points on a lot of different nights. So I think on this roster, Monty Williams now has more secondary and tertiary weapons than you would think, and it's going to be really, really tough to stop this team from scoring, even on nights where Kevin Durant is rusty, 5 of 18, 16 points. But what really showed out, when they moved Mikal Bridges, we were like, man, do they have enough defense? Is there enough grit? And I think the answer is yes, because of two unsung guys. We've seen Torrey Craig do this before, but we haven't really seen Josh Okogie other than early in the season when they were really shorthanded and he was getting some big minutes. Those two guys have both stepped in and done the exact same thing. And normally you don't want duplicity on your team. You don't want overlap. But sometimes you do need that. And in both cases, those guys come in and just play the dog role. They just go after the team's best player defensively. They crash the glass incredibly hard from the corners. Both of those guys kept a lot of possessions alive last night. And the broadcasters were talking about it the whole way. Minnesota's team was like, man, you got to watch those two. This is what they've done all season. And it was in the scouting report. Minnesota could not stop it. They've got some hustle there, and they've got some grit just enough that this is why I would put Phoenix above somebody like Sacramento at this point, even though it's a work in progress, and why I would put Phoenix on the same level potentially as Memphis and Denver. I don't think they're that far off in a 7-game series.
I can't find fault in what you're saying. You know, like I want to sort of like, I think there's so much of me that just wants to believe wholeheartedly in Sacramento, right? And I've sort of seen it throughout the entire season. But I know what Phoenix can do. I've seen what Phoenix can do, and Phoenix got better with the Kevin Durant addition. We got literally have seen it for like 2.5 games and a rolled ankle in the layup line. But, you know, like I know what's potentially there.
You already see the format for how it's going to work. It's not a question like in bringing in Kyrie where you go, how is that going to work with Luka? I don't really get it. With the Suns, it's like, no, I 100% understand how this is going to work.
And we said that with Kyrie at the time. We're like, maybe, I don't know. Like, I have no idea how these two are going to be able to coexist. And I don't know if you've heard any of the Luka comments in the last couple of games, post games, but he is depressed. He does not like playing with Kyrie. And, you know, maybe we're very much closer to the end of Kyrie in the NBA than we thought we'd be based on performance.
I think we are, folks. I think we are.
His track record says it, right? I mean, you know, outside of sort of Cleveland, which you can sort of match it that there's just a personality difference there with LeBron, and they still got to the NBA Finals and whatnot stuff. But like, he just not working Boston. It's not working in Dallas. It technically didn't work in Cleveland. And it's
didn't
all
really work in Brooklyn. I mean, it sort of did once in a while, but then it didn't, you know.
A lot of it's pointed right at the hands of Kyrie. Like, Harden's going to make the playoffs. Durant's going to make the playoffs. Kyrie's about to chase his team out of the playoffs.
Yeah.
Which is wild to me.
And you can't, this is an old term that's no longer politically correct, and they don't use it around the NBA anymore, but in the 90s and even just 10 years ago, it would have been the head case label, right? You know, Rod Strickland, Kenny Anderson, some of those guys, Stephon Marbury, very talented point guards. They all got that label. There was major question marks about whether they could help your team win. And Kyrie would be absolutely labeled with that. Today, there's no other way around it, where it's just like, show me that you can help a team actually be better and not make it about you. And is there some unfairness and some noise in there where then sometimes, because we're stuck asking that question so often, we kind of see what we want to see or what we don't want to see, and maybe an outsized portion of blame? Absolutely. But is that scenario like you think what used to happen to DeMarcus Cousins all the time? How much of that scenario and that unfairness is also self-inflicted by track record? The answer is quite a bit.
As we're sort of getting ready to wrap up, my son's running in here with his clothes on, ready to talk.
Yeah.
But I do want to ask you. this question as we get out of here. Hi, buddy. So, do you want to ask Joel a question about the NBA? You want to talk about our Knicks? You do? Okay.
We've got the green light.
Huge Knicks fan. Okay. Come on, Mike. Yeah. All right. We're talking about the Knicks here. We're actually not talking about the Knicks. I wanted to ask you before we get out of here, Joel. When you look at the bottom teams sort of that are in the play-in sort of part of the tournament, right? Are there any of those as we get to the final 5, 6, 7 games for teams? He muted my mic. Are there any of those that worry you as far as which of those teams, maybe the East and the West, do you think feel like they're more capable of making a deeper run? Miami comes to mind, but Miami's also really – it's hard to tell with Miami. They're really kind of ragged and older and stuff. But, like, they got all the experience and they got the coaching and, that comes to mind immediately. But I don't even know if they have the legs for that.
Right, and Miami is scoring the fewest amount of points in the league right now. I watched their game against the Knicks the other night. Last night, actually, the Knicks were able to pull that one out and win at home. But Miami, again, gave them a game. It was tough. Tyler Hero had kind of an off night. Jimmy Butler was a little bit quiet. They had to rely on secondary guys. But Miami in an Eastern Conference, like, not only can get out of the play-in tournament, I think they can win a playoff round. Is it likely? No, but I think that's still a lot to be said for a team that would come out of the play-in to go, no, they still are capable of stealing a series against somebody, maybe even against the top elite teams. It would have to be a big collapse, but it's possible. So I give that respect to Miami. I think in the West is where it gets a little more fluid because Minnesota or the Lakers could get out of the play-in tournament. I think they're the top two. They're sitting in 7 and 8 right now. We've said this about the Lakers already. They're capable, I think, of winning any play-in game and probably winning 1 or 2 games in a first-round series. I wouldn't give them much of a puncher's chance against the West elite this year, except for maybe the Kings, where you would see the Lakers pulling off an upset, even if full strength. But
just because they're so young, or do you think they match up well?
I think they match up well. I think the Lakers have that experience in their top two, the ability to grind something out, and now enough talent, including somebody like a D'Angelo Russell, to hit big shots. You're not just relying on LeBron to hit a big shot at the end or to try to find Anthony Davis as the buzzer sounds. You've got some irrational confidence guys and some guys who just flat out can knock down shots. Austin Reeves has been hot lately. Malik Beasley has been rather cold since coming over, but the track record says he's going to hit some big shots, in some tough games. Minnesota maybe is capable again of winning a first round series, probably against somebody like Sacramento.
I think they
get out. They're more than talented enough. It's, do they have enough time? Like last night in losing to Phoenix, they were missing guys, and they really have not had much time with the whole group together. So far, Karl Anthony Towns has integrated himself well enough without taking too many touches away from Anthony Edwards and making it weird, and without mucking stuff up with Rudy Gobert and making it too weird. He's done a fairly decent job of asserting himself without forcing it. And so Minnesota's there. And I will say this, talent-wise, like Dallas, if they get into the play-in tournament at all, Dallas is more than capable.
No, they're
Dallas is more than capable of winning any game, in the play-in tournament. I'm not giving them a first-round series at this point. No, absolutely not. But they are capable, I think, of beating anybody that's in that 7th through 10th
they can win a 140, 137 game, sure.
And maybe even getting lucky and winning 2 of them. Like, that's the Luka factor. That's the Kyrie wild card factor. It exists.
That's the, win or go home. This is your whole season right now in one game kind of factor.
Exactly. And, we would all feel differently about New Orleans if Zion wasn't Zion at this point.
Poor New Orleans,
actually available.
Man. Yes, poor New Orleans. I mean, they keep fighting, man, but man, we had so many high hopes for them.
He's hamstringing him at this point, unfortunately.
Let me ask you about one other team real quick before we get out of here. specifically for the play-in and maybe even a series after. We had so many high hopes for Chicago this year. We know that there's a talent on that team. We know that we feel as if Billy Donovan's a pretty good coach at this level, and
starting to come into question a little bit.
But that's what I'm wondering about. And is Billy Donovan and this Chicago Bulls team capable of getting out of the play-in, you think, and making a competitive first-round series? Because I think the talent's there. I don't think a deep run, like I don't think a semifinals kind of run, but I think they got the bodies there to win, depending on the matchup, to maybe get that first series. Am I off?
No, I think they're another team capable of winning games, but we have not seen them string together games consistently this year. And that's where you don't pick them in a series and where you have the major question marks. They've got a lot of talented guards, and this season would certainly be different. The obvious one here is if Lonzo Ball was healthy, because it would allow somebody like Alex Caruso and Ayo Dosunmu and even Patrick Beverley, who they brought in. And with a healthy Lonzo Ball, you maybe don't bring in a Patrick Beverley at all, but it would allow those guys and Kobe White to slide into more realistic roles for them and not be overextended. Zach LaVine's been a little bit hurt. DeMar DeRozan has come back down to earth a little bit from where he was. The front line, though, I think it's worrisome. Patrick Williams has not really lived up to the expectation there. I know he's important and they like a lot of the things that he does, but you don't look at Patrick Williams and go, yeah, that guy could start for just about any team in the league. You go, no, the Bulls keep talking themselves into Patrick Williams, and he's not a bad player, but what else is there? Nick Vucevic has been fine. He's been solid, but not second or third best player on a playoff team.
He's never sort of gotten back to the level that we thought a couple of years ago that he was going to be able to explode to. Yeah.
And so you're wondering whether, hey, was he just racking up all-star level stats on a really bad Orlando Magic team, and maybe he's overextended? And there's just really nothing else on that front line, coming off the bench. It's no disrespect to those guys, but there's not needle movers there. And I think they're overstocked at the guard position. They're understocked up front. They've got more work to do. They really are going to have to make a tough decision about whether Lonzo Ball is where this works. And I think the answer is no at this point. You're going to have to go in a different direction. If you get Ball back and he's healthy, fine. But is a starting backcourt of Caruso and LaVine, and DeRozan in the mix and Vucevic, is that a core to build around? Maybe, but you better do a better job of fleshing out the bench, and whoever that fifth starter is going to have to make more sense.
Yeah, that Ball injury really sort of exposed them, in an unfortunate way. I don't think the Patrick Beverley situation necessarily made them.
Patrick Beverley is another guy who maybe gets one more look next year, but looks like he doesn't have anything left in the tank, and actually is making the Timberwolves look smart that they cut bait. They gave him the money. They gave him the money, but they cut bait elsewhere because he's not able to knock down a shot. He still is a decent defender, but he's not like all NBA level defense right now. And so much of it is smoke and mirrors, sound and fury from him, but the production is waning.
So it sounds to me, when we're looking at the East, you really think that if there's going to be a team, that's Miami. You have no faith in Atlanta. You have seemingly no faith in Chicago to do much. And who else is there? Toronto is there. Washington still has a shot to, I guess, technically kind of squeeze in. But it seems like to you, it's as far as a team that can get further in the East after that play-in, for you, it's Miami or nothing else.
Yeah, it really is, because those other three teams are soft. The Hawks are just soft, and they've been soft for a few years now.
This is the grind time of the type of year. Like this is where great defense, having a couple of guys, and listen, say what you want about Kevin Love and him getting to his vacation home a little early there in Miami, but he is a dude you would want to want on that lineup when it comes to this time of the year. He is battle tested. He has run through it time after time after time again. So if you've got to have the type of style that grinds, Miami is the style that's sort of always been. I shouldn't say always, but with Jimmy Butler and with Eric Spoelstra has been this type of team that if they're going to have to grind it out in the in the postseason, it's going to have to be Miami. I don't think Miami makes it to the Eastern Finals. I don't think they're that good.
No.
But I guess I think you're talking me more and more into thinking that Miami, if they're going to win, if there's going to be a team that's in the play-in tournament they're just going to win a series after that. You have to tell me. I think you're talking me into Miami pretty well.
Toronto probably has the best starting five out of that group, especially with Jakob Poeltl there now, and they're able to move guys down again on the bench to better slots. But still, Toronto's bench is pretty awful, and you don't get a lot of scoring punch out of that group. I know they've moved Gary Trent into the second unit, but it's been an issue over the last couple of years where they're really kind of patchworking the way that bench is going to operate. But the starting five is nice, and I don't know if I would call Toronto soft, but I'm not going to call them a battle-tested, tough,
you can
gritty
say they're
team
soft
like Miami.
Right now.
Yeah. They're not the same as Miami is, but
who is, right? Like to a degree, like who is, especially that they're going to see.
I agree. I think there's going to be a couple of good series in the play-in. I would give Toronto the shot of getting out of the play-in more than I would Atlanta at this point, even though I know the Hawks are technically one spot above Toronto, but they have the same record. I would give it to the Raptors and the Heat to come out of that group.
Yeah, I think the Raptors are going to move on. I think the Heat are going to be. I think that's your. Yeah, I think those are probably going to be your two best teams of that. But I'll tell you what, I don't dislike Atlanta in that scenario that much right now. Like, and all it sort of has to be is like in April, right? Like what's happening in April for a very short period of time for the play-in. But yeah, if I'm going to trust, I guess, defense travels, grinders travel, and they've got all the dudes that have done it before. So,
right.
Like, what's not to trust about Miami at this point, except getting past this sort of section of the tournament. So, I'm with you, Joe. I'm with you. Even though they're all going to have to get through the Knicks and then to get to the NBA Finals, it's at least. Hey, can I ask you one? I know I'm going longer than I need to at this point, but can I ask you real quick about the top of the East, real quick, and specifically the Boston Celtics. The Celtics. Yes, they've clinched and they're in. Yes, they're going to be the playoffs. Yes, they're the NBA Finals last year. Yes, they're essentially the same team as last year, and yes, they're really, really good. But if you're looking for a team that's been in the top three the entire year like this, do you think, as I think, that Boston may be the most vulnerable team to being knocked up early? Knocked up early. We're not getting pregnant. Knocked off early. Well, I'd be surprised if they got pregnant. But getting knocked off early. I think there's a lot of holes in that team if you get a good matchup with them. Like, say, if Miami did play Boston, for example, like if that ended up being the 2-7 matchup or something like that, I could see Boston giving them a heck of a lot of problems. Because I do think Boston's kind of soft, to be honest with you. So I know they're stacked. They're a much better team overall.
Right.
But I think Miami would make someone like Boston grind out 7 when Milwaukee, it wouldn't be a test. I think Milwaukee would beat them in 5. You know what I mean?
I disagree a little bit. I think Boston has had difficulty as Marcus Smart has come back and as Robert Williams have come back to get those guys to full strength, to find the exact right role for them and the way that fits with some of the new guys or guys that have stepped in to those spots. They continue to start Al Horford, bring Robert Williams off the bench. Smart's back in the starting lineup, but that means Malcolm Brogdon and Derek White are both off the bench, which I think was originally the role envisioned for those guys. It's moved Sam Hauser out of the rotation. I think Boston is capable of winning pretty, and I think they're capable of winning ugly as well because of the different options that they have.
Think they can win ugly?
I think they can, because Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown are guys that can and do ISO against double teams and against all sorts of defenses, and they make stuff happen without always having to rely on kicking it to somebody else and hoping that your teammate knocks down the shot. Boston has enough of those guys who can knock down that shot if it comes out to them.
I just think of the top 3
to manufacture.
They're least capable of doing that. I think Philadelphia can win ugly more consistently. I think Milwaukee can definitely beat you ugly if they need to.
Cleveland can too.
Yeah, well, wouldn't have the fourth seed there. Cleveland can do that, but again, I worry about the teams that haven't done it before and haven't. Boston's had a whole bunch of crew that just went to the finals last year. So, but I'm thinking like if you have to grind it out for say 2 out of the 7 games in a series, I think Boston is the least capable of doing that. I've seen it the
I
fewest
disagree.
times this year.
I'll take Boston over Philly. I'll take Boston over Philly. Because James Harden track record has disappeared in games like that. Track record,
true, and he had the Achilles thing that he says he's been bothering him for a few.
Doc
months.
Rivers has flubbed.
Okay, that's
games
not fair.
like
Doc
that.
Rivers is no
Joel
longer
Embiid has played phenomenal in certain games like that, but also has that tendency to potentially mentally take himself out of the game with frustration as fouls mount and calls don't go his way and that sort of thing. I'm less concerned about him, and we like the Philly roster. They've been through this. They've been through these wars, but Boston's just as battle-tested, and I don't see as many.
As battle-tested.
They are as battle-tested as the Sixers, if not more so. Yeah.
Philadelphia's been doing
it. The Celtics went to the NBA Finals.
I don't mean like not battle tested, but as battle tested. I mean, just Joel Embiid. This James Harden's been in the playoffs like every single year.
Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown have been in the playoffs just as many times, or awfully close to as many times as Joel Embiid has gotten there.
I'm gonna have to fact check you on that. You may be right, but I'm gonna fact check you on that. If I remember to fact check you,
please do, because Marcus Smart would be in that group as well. Al Horford obviously has more playoff games to his name than probably all of those guys combined. So, and the fact that Boston was just there and successfully got out of the East last season, I worry about them less. I think it's going to be a slugfest. I don't think that any of the lower seeds, Miami included, unfortunately the Knicks included, although I give the Knicks the best shot out of any of the lower seeds, I don't think any of the lower seeds really can upend the top 4 in the East. I think we're going to get a stock 1 through 4 semifinals, and that's where you're really going to find out about these teams. And in that, I give Boston a puncher's chance against Milwaukee, Philly, or Cleveland. It could be the Knicks. Like, the Knicks do have a shot, especially if against the Cavs. They got a shot. It'll be a great series, but I still would pick Cleveland coming out of that. And I am not worried about Boston at this point, but I'm not picking them to go to the finals either. I'm just saying I would not look at them as susceptible the way I would at like Sacramento because of the inexperience, or like the Denver Nuggets where we go, are they really just in first place because somebody had to be in first place in the West this year? Is that really all it is? Like that, I don't have the same concerns, and I don't about any of the top 4 in the East.
All right, Joel, I'm going to do a quick fact. I don't know if I'm on mute right now. Yeah, I'm off mute. Okay, so you heard my son the whole time. So quick fact check of one particular player versus another, and then later you're about to see how wrong you are. Are you breaking the printer over there, buddy? Okay, good. Joel Embiid, career number of playoff games that he has. This does not include last year, but okay, this does. Okay, Joel Embiid, 50 playoff games played. All right, Joel, You ready?
Yep.
Here's Jason Tatum, just 74. See, I told you, Joel Embiid and these Sixers much more battle tested than Jason Tatum. How long has Jason Tatum been in the league?
It's not just that. It's that the Celtics have gotten to the conference finals multiple times and have gotten to the finals while Jason Tatum has been there. And you'll see the same thing with Jaylen Brown, same thing with Marcus Smart, because they've all been together. Whereas the Sixers have bounced out in the second round multiple times now. That's the difference.
Jason Tatum and Joel Embiid have both been starting in the 2018 playoffs.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Joel, do you want to apologize now, or do you want to wait?
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Is this the apology you're doing right now?
I accept your apology.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, Joel, in terms of one player, I have not looked up Jaylen Brown. But
you will find Tatum, the same thing with the other two.
I don't know. He may have been hurt. Listen. I mean, he wasn't the one that went and got like a root canal or something during the Eastern Conference Finals or whatever it was. But that's fine. Okay. All right, Joel. I guess that's going to do it for us on this podcast. Went longer than I thought we were going to go, but that's cool. Next week, Joe, we'll be laser focused. We'll probably have, I can imagine there being a ton of movements left by the time we speak next week. for the playoff spots. We might have a little bit of opportunity, but we'll be looking at playoff matchups, starting with the play-in tournament next week.
Mm-hmm.
Joel, it just seems like yesterday you and I were predicting how good the Pelicans were going to be, and we have been right on it. Pelicans in 6, right, Joel?
In a 1-game series.
In a 1-game series, right. All right.
The Patrick Ewing episode is in the books. Like, share, subscribe, ring the bell over on YouTube if you want the video version. If you want audio only, Spreaker, Spotify, iTunes, wherever you get your podcasts. This has been Basketball by Association.
All right. We say bye-bye, Joel.